casting one's gaze into the great abyss, where the deep ink of midnight stretches without end, dappled with the quiet embers of the past. It is easy to imagine that this flawless harmony of distant, slowly meandering stars has remained exactly as it does in this suspended moment, blissfully untouched by the passage of time. Yet hidden deep beneath such a breathtaking canopy of twinkling silver light is a much more profound story of celestial evolution, waiting patiently to be heard. This sweeping narrative reveals how our earliest architects did not simply inherit a peaceful kingdom, but rather they repeatedly molded a tranquil existence out of the chaotic elements of early creation. This continuous journey through ancient Mesopotamian lore charts a fascinating progression from that turbulent dawn of primeval existence. Our wandering path moves slowly from those initial primordial battlefields, carrying us gently toward the quiet, shadowed archives of a sprawling mud-brick empire. Here, a grand epic saga spanning a glorious rise of an omnipotent figure in the Anunnaki pantheon traces their absolute dominion through the creeping vulnerabilities that inevitably accompany an era of unquestioned power. Before a grand celestial architecture could ever be perfectly aligned, raw, unbridled forces of wild nature had to be beautifully subdued by wise, immortal hands. Vast rotating spheres of our universe were originally set into their hypnotic motion through careful, deliberate intention rather than random chance. These foundational myths reflect the delicate balance holding our entire physical reality safely in place. Is a timeless secret woven into the very fabric of the brilliant speckled lights of the infinite night sky. Generations have patiently peered upward into the silent expanse turning overhead, curiously searching the vast darkness in an attempt to understand if the path of our lives is merely a random sequence of fleeting moments, or if the ultimate fate of the cosmos at large is already laid out by a predetermined order written deeply into the luminous canopy of distant stars. As the comforting weight of this mystery slowly unfolds, we delve into the rich Mesopotamian lore surrounding this mesmerizing journey, the legendary Tablets of Destiny. We begin ages before the Great Flood and the mystical reigns of the first 8 antediluvian kings, at a time when the highest pantheon of Anunnaki gods, Enki, Enlil and Anu, held the ultimate source code of all reality. Within these deep folds of history, we explore how Sumerian mythology channeled the eternal rhythm of the fates into divine masterpieces of heaven and earth, and how the Babylonian creation story, the Enuma Elish, retold this epic saga through the rise of a new divine champion. This ancient narrative unfolds long before mankind ever took its first breath, during a primeval era when the sweeping terrestrial plains were completely devoid of human footsteps. There were no sprawling settlements or wandering mortal shepherds, only a pristine and untamed wilderness resting silently beneath a luminous celestial blanket. The untroubled earth belonged only to a bustling society of younger deities who freely roamed the vast river valleys and towering mountain peaks in the earliest days of creation. These youthful and energetic spirits filled the ancient landscape with relentless activity, their immortal voices echoing across the empty delta as they tended to the raw elements of nature. They glided effortlessly through the thick morning mists and deep green marshlands, exploring the boundless potential of a newly formed world that had not yet known the heavy touch of mortal ambition. But even without the burdens of a growing human civilization to manage, the sheer magnitude of sustaining the winding rivers and lush forests required a delicate and continuous equilibrium. The highest celestial authorities observed this thriving divine population from their towering shrines, recognizing that the boundless energy of the younger pantheon needed to be anchored to a permanent structure. Operating with the undeniable force of the rising river tide, these senior gods sat together in a peaceful assembly to decree the flawless and eternal fates of the universe. Every divine command was woven seamlessly into the vast and unfolding tapestry of the ancient heavens, ensuring that the physical world below bloomed in perfect harmony with the stars resting silently above. Without a flawless and overarching set of cosmic laws to govern their actions, the wildly unbridled earth could easily succumb to the creeping shadows of celestial chaos. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know when and where you are joining us from in the comments section. There is something comforting in imagining countless listeners scattered across distant lands and different time zones, all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this boring history journey, finding it helps you relax or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week, as well as to continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. And if you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now, as the fires of the ancient world burn softly beneath the stars, we return once more to the great cities, sacred knowledge, and the divine order we are told in 5,000-year-old clay tablets was woven into the heavens themselves. The supreme creators understood that they must devise a master framework capable of directing every single aspect of existence, from the gentle shifting of ocean tides to the subtle movements of brightly wandering planets. To preserve this delicate harmony for all eternity, these masterful architects began to conceptualize a series of sacred instructions that would permanently dictate the future of the entire universe. These profound primordial designs would eventually become the foundational pillars for all future life, acting as an infallible guide that would one day organize the untamed wilderness into a manageable, bountiful earthly garden. Early priests would come to revere these intricate divine codes as the essential foundation for all earthly prosperity. But before these ethereal concepts could be handed down to shape the mortal realm, they had to be captured and contained within a vessel of absolute and unyielding endurance. The highest gods realized they needed a physical manifestation of their immense power, designed specifically to bind these intricate laws into an unbreakable system of supreme authority. This vital realization sparked a truly momentous undertaking within the deepest and most insulated sanctuaries of their divine realm, far removed from the roaming younger deities of the valleys, driving them to forge an ultimate, binding artifact of universal governance that would initiate the grand mechanism capable of defining all existence, while establishing the future dominion of the universe. At the very dawn of creation, the supreme triad of Anunnaki gods stood together in silent contemplation above the dark, primordial waters of the untamed abyss. Enki, Enlil, and the great sky father An looked down upon this turbulent aquatic expanse, sharing a unified vision of ultimate harmony. They desired to establish an unbreakable, deliberate order over those swirling tides, deciding to forge two distinct but perfectly unified systems to govern all emerging life across the cosmos. To physically manifest their flawless celestial architecture, these wise creators first conceived a series of sacred individual blueprints known throughout early antiquity as the Holy May. These profound instructions carried the exact mathematical parameters required to organize all future societies, holding the hidden knowledge of agriculture, administration, and complex early culture. Every divine code functioned as a beautifully crafted conceptual seed, waiting patiently to be planted in the fertile minds of a sprawling mortal civilization that had yet to take its first breath. These intricate codes contain the unspoken rules for cultivating fertile soil, detailing exactly how to guide sweet, rushing waters into dry, waiting basins. They held the sacred knowledge required to construct towering mud-brick temples which would cast long shadows over the rolling Mesopotamian plains in the years to come, and established the complex social hierarchies that would eventually govern the bustling cities which surrounded them. The Holy May represented an absolute peak of divine intellect, beautifully translating cold celestial logic into tangible earthly prosperity. But the supreme architects inherently knew that these delicate seeds of cultural progress could not simply be scattered blindly across an untamed, empty void. To ensure absolute cosmic harmony, they required a central, overarching authority to bind those isolated instructions together into a singular, turning mechanism of unerring precision. This necessity led directly to the miraculous creation of the ToopTee SheeMahTee, an artifact revered widely in ancient clay records as the Tablet of Destinies. This sacred clay tablet was intricately designed to act as an ultimate controlling mechanism and driving force, possessing an incomprehensible, esoteric magic capable of bending reality itself. Whoever managed to possess this heavy earthen ledger held the exclusive, all-encompassing ability to decree the permanent fate of both immortal gods and future mortals alike. An ancient, absolute power pulsed silently from its cuneiform inscriptions, allowing its bearer to dictate the unyielding laws of our vast universe, commanding every rushing atmospheric wind and deeply buried subterranean spring with absolute authority. Without the stabilizing force of this ultimate artifact, the sprawling celestial pathways and rushing terrestrial rivers would quickly unravel into a tangled ruin. The heavy clay ledger allowed its beholder to effortlessly ensure the predictable rising of the golden sun and the soothing arrival of cooling winter rains. It functioned as an unbreakable seal of cosmic destiny. To physically construct such an intoxicating vessel of supreme power, the brilliant water deity Enki sank gracefully into the cool, freshwater depths of the abyss. He traveled far below shifting surface currents, reaching a pristine, darkened riverbed, completely untouched by the roaming younger gods of the upper atmosphere. He plunged his hands deep into those silent waters, pulling up massive, heavy handfuls of pure river mud from its primordial depths. This extremely dense subterranean clay offered the perfect, adaptable material for securely holding the infinite complexities of their grand celestial design. Rising slowly back to the peaking crests of the ocean's surface, Enki presented this dripping, fragrant earth to his brother and father, who waited patiently upon the nearby banks of newly formed shores. A heavy scent of wet silt mingled beautifully with the crisp night air, creating an atmosphere of intense, serene anticipation across the shadowed terrestrial plains. Together, these three ancient architects began to meticulously shape the damp material, working in absolute unison with a slow, hypnotic, and rhythmic grace. They carefully folded the infinite mathematical measurements of the boundless universe directly into the soft, welcoming folds of wet soil. Every sweeping orbit of a distant planet, along with the precise turning of the agricultural seasons, was physically pressed into this miraculous earthen canvas. Infusing the yielding mud with such overwhelming divine intelligence required a dedicated level of sustained focus from these highest celestial authorities. As they smoothed the heavy block of clay, raw energy from the underlying forces of primordial creation began to weave itself permanently into the very essence of its earthen form. The gods meticulously sculpted this sacred masterpiece, embedding the exact coordinates of future galaxies deep within its thick, impenetrable earthen boundaries. Once its physical shaping was perfectly completed, the damp tablet was elevated high above the dark waters to be offered up to the silent sky watching from above. There they were left to slowly cure under the pure, blinding light of millions of celestial stars, absorbing the radiant cosmic energy of the heavens. This intense stellar heat gradually hardened the soft river mud into solid stone, locking the sacred geometry of all existence safely into a permanent place. As moisture completely evaporated from the baked clay, this newly forged artifact began to react to the immense magical power trapped within. The thick tablet hummed with a heavy, pulsing cosmic resonance, vibrating softly against the cool night air like a living, breathing entity. Its steady thrum perfectly mirrored the slow rotation of the celestial spheres, acting as a true beating heart for the expanding, primeval universe. This breathtaking mastery of celestial architecture allowed these two distinct artifacts to function together in a seamless, flawlessly integrated synergy. The Holy May provided the raw individual instructions required for establishing human civilization, acting as the foundational building blocks of all earthly progress. Meanwhile, the grand Tablet of Destinies served as the absolute ruling ledger that commanded them, keeping every isolated element in a state of perfect balance. Together, this unified system was believed by ancient Mesopotamians to have formed the living source code for all creation, a magnificent mechanism designed to prevent the natural world from ever falling back into darkness. Every delicate cuneiform wedge pressed deeply into the glowing surface of the Tablet of Destinies functioned as an active, living force driving the continuous rotation of the entire cosmos. By organizing the sprawling heavens into these highly predictable calculations, the Anunnaki gods established an eternal anchor that would safely guide all future ages. Throughout the earliest recorded history of this divine pantheon, it was determined that such universe-altering power required a fiercely dedicated protector. This grand cosmic ledger of heaven and earth was graciously granted to the great wind god Enlil, who ruled over the sweeping atmospheric storms from his high northern crown. He took solemn possession of the heavy, humming clay, accepting the staggering responsibility of maintaining unquestioned authority over the sprawling terrestrial realm. To ensure that the delicate balance of the cosmos was never disrupted, Enlil wore the glowing artifact securely upon his own divine chest, where it radiated a brilliant aura of absolute supremacy, legitimizing his unquestioned rule over the waking world. The powerful magnetic frequency it emitted constantly nourished the deep roots of all civilized life, guaranteeing a peaceful prosperity for the entire earth. With the sovereign ledger of destiny resting safely upon his divine chest, our early universe settled into a flawless, eternal rhythm. Wandering spirits of a primeval earth could surrender completely to this soothing cadence of celestial administration, trusting their fragile existence to its protective embrace. Yet even with cosmic fates permanently sealed into stone, the physical realities of establishing such a vast administration would soon require an earthly reflection. Down within the bustling streets of early Mesopotamia, mortal caretakers would later come to adopt this exact same method of bureaucratic organization. Scribes working under the scorching sun understood that a simple block of damp river clay held absolutely no inherent power on its own. An unmarked tablet remained legally non-binding, completely devoid of any true authority, until it was properly validated by a specialized identifying mark. To transform the soft mud into an unbreakable decree, ancient administrators utilized a uniquely carved cylinder seal. rolling these intricate stone cylinders across a wet surface left behind a beautiful, continuous relief of highly detailed images. Craftsmen spent countless hours carving tiny mythological scenes into hard pieces of smooth hematite. This mesmerizing action functioned as the ancient equivalent of a royal signature, instantly binding an earthen canvas with undeniable legal weight. This intelligently structured bureaucracy flawlessly mirrored a much grander, celestial mythology operating high above their heads. Ancient texts describe how the magnificent Tablet of Destinies was subjected to this exact same process of divine authentication. Supreme creators did not simply leave their master ledger blank, but chose to deeply impress it with their own personal cosmic signets. By rolling their majestic seals across that primordial clay, they permanently locked its universe-altering magic securely into place. Every intricate groove pressed into its glowing surface carried a pure, undeniable essence of supreme immortal will, finalizing the sacred blueprints of the Holy May, ensuring that no chaotic force could ever rewrite their established heavenly order. Enduring memories of this profound celestial artifact survive today. These magnificent relics offer a vivid, visual window into how early populations imagined their supreme deities. Wandering scholars can still observe majestic gods depicted proudly wearing this ultimate ledger of fate directly upon their immortal chests. Rather than holding a simple rectangular book, immortal figures display this artifact as a massive, intricate, circular medallion. It rests heavily against their forms like a glowing breastplate, radiating an aura of ultimate authority over all primeval creation. This luminous badge of power served as a steady anchor for our entire universe, humming softly with pure resonant frequencies. Shimmering bands of cosmic energy were said to have radiated outward from this worn medallion, washing over a vast pantheon of lesser deities with a calming warmth. Its sheer magnitude commanded absolute respect, subduing any restless thoughts of rebellion among the younger gods, and maintaining an unbroken harmony across that vast celestial seas. Its radiant beauty illuminated the darkest corners of space, casting a protective blanket of soft silver light over sleeping terrestrial planes. But this overwhelming concentration of magic would soon provoke the earliest primeval trials of heaven, threatening to disrupt the peaceful slumber of the earth. Such an intoxicating display of absolute supremacy radiating from that celestial tablet inevitably drew many envious eyes from the deepest, shadowed corners of the night. One such creature, a fearsome winged entity known to ancient priests as Anzo, watched Enlil with a brooding jealousy, plotting his treacherous betrayal silently from afar. This monstrous lion-headed eagle desired to hold the ultimate source code of reality within his own sharp talons. Sumerian mythology vividly recalls the fateful moment when the great wind god temporarily removed his heavy clay artifact to bathe peacefully in pure, deeply refreshing waters. Seizing this brief, unexpected opportunity of divine vulnerability, the massive beast swooped silently down into the deeply fragrant northern sanctuary, where Anzu swiftly snatched the glowing blueprints from their sacred resting place. He made his escape rapidly toward the rugged eastern Zagros Mountains, with the ledger of cosmic authority gripped tightly in his feathered grasp. Soaring high above those fertile river valleys, this massive beast carried the blinding light of creation directly into distant, shadowed mountain peaks. His monstrous shrieks echoed violently across the expansive desert, signaling a terrifying shift in hierarchy. Mortals sleeping far below stirred uneasily upon their soft, woven reed mats, sensing a sudden, creeping darkness falling heavily over their once peaceful, meticulously managed world. This audacious theft instantly paralyzed the beautiful turning rotation of heavenly spheres, plunging the spiritual and earthly realms into a sudden, terrifying stillness. To restore the delicate balance to a deeply fractured cosmos, a valiant warrior god named Ninurta stepped bravely forward to hunt down that treacherous avian thief. Armed with violently rushing atmospheric storms, this brave champion pursued the fleeing monster across the dark, tumultuous skies to reclaim the stolen cosmic fates. High upon a desolate rocky peak, these two formidable titans clashed with a deafening roar that violently shook every single mud-brick foundation far below. Ninurta unleashed powerful, raging winds to completely sever those massive wings of his enemy, forcing a defeated Anzu to relinquish his precious stolen prize. Scattered feathers from the fallen beast blew wildly across a desolate and barren mountain landscape, marking an end to this terrifying rebellion. Triumphant storm winds slowly subsided into a quiet, calm, gentle breeze, carrying a profound sense of relief back towards those frightened, waiting deities. A victorious champion stood proudly upon shattered stone, believing his unparalleled martial prowess had permanently secured a peaceful future. Yet, in the Sumerian poem Ninurta and the Turtle, this story takes a new turn, revealing that during the wildly chaotic aftermath of this primeval duel, the tablet was said to have tumbled rapidly downward into the deeply secluded, darkened aquatic currents of the subterranean freshwater abyss, coming to rest silently upon the smooth, sandy floor of the Apsu. Furthermore, following his legendary victorious battle, an overwhelming sense of dangerous arrogance began to slowly corrupt the pure mind of the previously noble warrior. Ninurta gazed deeply into those submerged depths, suddenly desiring to claim the absolute power over all primeval creation for himself, rather than returning it to his father, Enlil. Meanwhile, watching quietly from his luminous underwater palace, the wise water god, Enki, recognized this dangerous, arrogant shift in the young champion's heart. This profoundly cunning deity understood that such universe-altering magic must remain completely safe from any selfish, power-hungry ambitions. To protect the fragile cosmic design, Enki decided to fashion a brilliant, subtle defense, using soft river mud gathered from a nearby wet bank. Working with a slow, hypnotic grace, he carefully molded this damp clay into the shape of a humble turtle. Enki breathed his potent esoteric magic into his tiny earthen creation, bestowing upon it the unwavering purpose to ambush the pridefully boasting hero. This magical reptile slipped effortlessly into those dark, swirling tides, swimming quietly toward a shallow shoreline where Ninurta stood plotting his own grand ascension. As the mighty warrior reached greedily down into those cool, rushing waters, the tiny earthen creature sprang forward from its muddy concealment. The enchanted turtle clamped its strong jaws firmly onto his heel, while simultaneously digging an inescapable, deep pit in the slippery riverbed beneath them. Ninurta stumbled backward into this sinking hollow, thrashing helplessly against a brilliant, magical trap designed to completely humble his soaring, unchecked arrogance. Trapped tightly within the muddy snare, this glorious conqueror quickly realized his immense physical strength was entirely useless against such subtle aquatic magic. Like the great Anzu bird before him, he was forced to surrender his self-serving dreams, bitterly acknowledging that supreme authority should never be seized through brute force alone. The intelligent water god successfully preserved our delicate universal balance, ensuring that, for now, those powerful cosmic blueprints once again remained safely hidden from envious eyes. The heavy ledger of destinies was returned peacefully to its rightful place amongst the highest authority of gods, while the brilliant stars finally resumed their slow, comforting rotation above the sprawling Mesopotamian empire, bathing silent mud-brick cities in a familiar, soothing silver glow. While those brilliant stars resumed their slow rotation over the winding streets, later generations of storytellers began to adapt this primeval lore into an even grander tale of celestial dispute. Ancient scribes pressing their reeds into damp clay recorded the sweeping Enuma Elish, framing a terrifying new threat. This monumental Babylonian epic speaks of a dark era long before the Great Flood, when a massive dragon goddess of bitter salt water rose slowly from the lightless depths of an uncharted ocean. Her name was Tiamat, a fearsome primordial entity whose vast aquatic form embodied the swirling, untamed chaos within the unformed cosmos. Her ancient slumber was violently broken when the wise water god Enki used his powerful magic to subdue and conquer her beloved husband Apsu, the original god of fresh water. Enraged by this devastating loss, a deep and terrible resentment stirred within her churning waves, sparking a desperate desire for fierce retribution against the younger generation of deities. She slowly prepared to wage a devastating war of succession against them, seeking to drown their meticulously ordered universe beneath a suffocating blanket of cold, heavy salt water. Roaring tempest winds answered her furious call, whipping previously calm surfaces into an awe-inducing frenzy of towering, violent crests. As the primordial salty ocean, Tiamat possessed the inherent power to manifest living creatures from her depths. She willfully directed this creative energy toward the darkness, shaping the very flesh of her new offspring to defy the radiant accord, and transforming her life-giving waters into a crucible of monstrous creation. Deep within the pitch-black chasm of the hidden abyss, she bred a multitude of terrifying beasts, born from chaos to form an unstoppable, nightmarish army. It is said that the 11 monsters of Tiamat, all various different types of fearsome creatures, were fashioned in her murky depths, their serpentine veins intentionally filled with toxic venom instead of warm blood. Among this monstrous legion was the massive horned dragon, the venomous scorpion man, the massive multi-headed hydra, and the savage dog among others, all bred specifically to spread overwhelming dread across the heavens. These fierce, untamed abominations slithered upward through freezing currents, their sharp teeth and merciless claws promising to tear apart the carefully constructed foundations of the earthly garden, breaking peaceful terrestrial plains into scattered fragments. To properly direct Tiamat's creatures, the enraged dragon goddess sought a formidable partner capable of commanding such overwhelming, destructive power. She made a fateful, terrifying decision to elevate a deity named Kingu, drawing him close as her new consort, crowning him absolute supreme commander. By placing him upon an elevated throne of swirling dark waters, she bestowed upon him ultimate military authority over her fearsome, venomous legion. Yet military strength alone was never enough to command the intricate complexities of the celestial spheres, for true universal dominance required a legal, foundational anchor. Drawing upon her primordial status as the ancient mother of the deep, our enraged dragon goddess brazenly usurped the glowing Tablet of Destinies, tearing the vital source code of reality away from its established heavenly hierarchies. She presented it to her new consort as an ultimate gift, seeking to permanently legitimize his absolute rule over all primeval creation. Kingu eagerly accepted this radiant clay artifact, becoming completely intoxicated by the blinding aura of supreme power pulsing steadily from its ancient cuneiform inscriptions. With arrogant pride, he fixed that magical ledger directly to his own chest, wearing the heavy earthen stone like a brilliantly glowing breastplate of ultimate authority. This deeply symbolic action momentarily placed the fragile framework of our entire universe directly into hungry hands of greed, silencing the soothing melodies of distant stars. Because the sacred blueprints were now controlled by malevolent forces, the flawless mechanical rhythms of heaven began to dangerously unravel. Dark clouds choked the gentle silver light of familiar constellations, while violent storms threatened to wash away fragile mud-brick settlements resting quietly below. A heavy, suffocating atmosphere of dread settled over the once luminous shrines of ancient deities, plunging a paralyzed divine assembly into a state of overwhelming fear. The sweet fragrance of blooming river reeds was suddenly replaced by a bitter, metallic scent of salt water blowing fiercely across the southern delta. It seemed as though the beautifully managed earthly realm would soon be erased completely, swallowed endlessly by the creeping cold shadows of the turbulent abyss. Ancient creators watched helplessly from high temple platforms, realizing their meticulously organized ecosystem was teetering precariously upon the edge of total annihilation. Standing proudly before his dark legion of twisted serpents, Kingu commanded his stolen magic to rewrite the peaceful destinies of early mankind. Healing resonant frequencies that once nourished the deep roots of primeval civilization were twisted into harsh, dissonant vibrations that shook the foundational pillars of the heavens. As roaring oceans prepared to drown those highest celestial heights, exhausted younger deities retreated into their quiet sanctuaries to await the impending doom. This suffocating threat of a bitter global deluge required a carefully calculated intervention, paving a clear way for a radiant champion to step bravely out from creeping shadows. For the heavily guarded secrets of our primeval universe still held a hidden defense, waiting patiently for a true hero to reclaim the fallen crown. The younger deities trembled in fear, a suffocating sense of despair washing over their once vigorous assembly, as the relentless approach of the dragon goddess threatened to erase all primeval creation. Even the supreme architects of the cosmos found themselves entirely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of this encroaching nightmare. Yet within this overwhelming atmosphere of absolute dread, a brilliant spark of divine intelligence defiantly refused to be extinguished. Emerging from the insulated quiet chambers of the subterranean freshwater sea, a magnificent young champion stepped bravely into the fading light. This glorious savior was known to the ancient priests as Marduk, the radiant son of the great water god Ea, otherwise known as Enki. Ancient clay records describe this deity as a being of unparalleled perfection, radiating a blinding aura of pure solar energy. Stepping proudly before the frightened assembly of his ancestors, Marduk brought a sudden and deeply comforting warmth to the shivering heavenly court. His unyielding confidence cut effortlessly through the heavy blanket of despair, wrapping the exhausted deities in a protective and reassuring embrace. With a voice that resonated like the deep and soothing rumble of a distant summer storm, he promised to personally defeat the surging saltwater chaos, vowing to safely subdue the monstrous army of serpents, and strike down the raging dragon goddess who threatened to wash away their meticulous designs. But to successfully command the complex elements of the universe in battle, Marduk humbly insisted that the highest council grant him the absolute, supreme kingship over the entire expanse of the heavens and the earth in return. The anxious assembly eagerly accepted his bold terms, rejoicing greatly at the sudden prospect of their miraculous deliverance from the turbulent deep. Senior gods hastily transferred their immense collective powers directly into the capable hands of this radiant new leader. With his supreme destiny permanently sealed by the grateful pantheon, the brilliant champion prepared to descend into the darkest corners of the brewing conflict. To navigate the treacherous and boiling currents of the approaching tempest, Marduk armed himself with the most pure and formidable elements of nature. He gathered the rushing atmospheric winds to his side, calling upon the gentle southern breeze and the fierce northern gale to serve as his loyal escorts. Mounting the magnificent and fearful chariot of the storm flood, the glowing deity rode bravely out to meet the suffocating threat. The blinding illumination of his solar radiance spilled brilliantly across the dark and empty void, casting long shadows against the approaching wave of monsters. He steered his rushing chariot directly toward the swirling epicenter of the saltwater chaos, completely undisturbed by the deafening roar of the ocean around him. His golden light pierced deeply through the bitter metallic fog, slowly revealing the towering and furious form of Tiamat waiting in the distance. Standing beside the writhing body of the dragon goddess was the arrogant commander Kingu, wearing the radiant clay ledger of the universe upon his chest. As the champion of the gods drew near, the stolen magic of the ancient tablets proved entirely useless against the pure, flawless majesty of Marduk. The usurper gazed into the blinding confidence of the young warrior, and his treacherous mind was instantly shattered. Kingu felt his dark determination melt completely away, plunging his venomous army into a sudden state of profound confusion. The monstrous battalion quickly faltered beneath the overwhelming light of the hero's approaching storm chariot, leaving the dragon goddess to face the divine champion alone. Tiamat unleashed a furious and deafening cry that shook the very bedrock of the terrestrial plains, furiously thrashing her massive aquatic body against the sky. She violently hurled her dark and deceitful incantations towards the approaching savior, attempting to trap his radiant mind in a web of mesmerizing falsehoods. But the absolute sovereign magic of the newly crowned king easily deflected her bitter spells, absorbing them harmlessly into his golden aura. Marduk maintained a slow and hypnotic advance, answering her chaotic rage with a beautifully centered state of calmness. With a single and deliberate motion, the great warrior gracefully cast his shimmering celestial net across the turbulent expanse of the battlefield. The wide, unbreakable mesh settled heavily over the surging body of the sea, wrapping the raging goddess in an inescapable entrapment. She opened her massive, cavernous jaws to swallow the descending snare, hoping to consume the very fabric of the heavens in her blinding fury. Seizing this fleeting moment of ultimate vulnerability, Marduk unleashed the rushing, uncontrollable gales of the fierce wind directly into her open mouth. Powerful atmospheric currents surged aggressively down her throat, violently bloating her massive belly and preventing her from closing her terrible jaws. Her sprawling, untamed oceans were completely paralyzed by the sweeping, invisible breath of the sky, pinning the primeval entity helplessly against the stars. Drawing his heavy wooden bow with absolute precision, the radiant champion then released a single and decisive arrow into the howling wind. The pure mathematical magic of the heavens guided the weapon flawlessly through the chaotic tempest, striking the dragon goddess and severing her dark heart. This monumental strike instantly extinguished her chaotic life force, bringing a sudden and peaceful end to the suffocating threat. As the massive form of Tiamat fell motionless upon the celestial battlefield, the terrifying army of venomous monsters instantly lost their ferocious courage. Twisted serpents and savage beasts broke their ranks, scattering wildly into the empty, uncharted corners of the void. The deafening roars of the primordial saltwater were finally replaced by a deep and profoundly restorative silence that echoed across the entire cosmos. High above the flat green plains of Mesopotamia, a quiet release of all tensions drifted heavily over the vast, newly cleansed celestial expanse. A victorious champion rested peacefully within his golden chariot, surveying the vanquished host with unwavering authority. Moving with a slow and deliberate grace, Marduk stepped down from his heavenly vessel and approached the lifeless form of the defeated enemy commander. Kingu lay bound and motionless upon the starlit stones, his treacherous ambitions entirely erased by the overwhelming supreme power of the new king. The sacred earthen ledger of destinies still rested securely against his chest, emitting a faint and tragic pulse of corrupted magic. Our radiant champion gazed down at the glowing stone, recognizing the staggering responsibility that its recovery would bring to his reign. With a gentle and steady hand, he reached down to unfasten the heavy cosmic ledger from the armor of the fallen general, stripping the glowing tablet away from the lifeless chest of Kingu, and rightfully reclaiming the ultimate symbol of universal governance. As his immortal fingers wrapped securely around the cool river clay, the pure resonant frequencies of the universe instantly reawakened. Steady and comforting hums of the planetary gears returned to the quiet night air, vibrating with a renewed atmosphere of clarity. Wandering familiar stars resumed their highly predictable, reassuring patrol across the massive golden highway of the central equatorial band and beyond. Marduk held the pulse of the expanding universe safely within his own radiant and capable hands, preparing the cosmos for an era of unprecedented architectural wonder. He gazed thoughtfully down at the heavy earthen ledger, feeling its pure cosmic energy vibrating softly against his immortal skin like a steady, living heartbeat. The consequential weight of this glorious triumph demanded an immediate and enduring resolution designed to permanently secure the beautifully balanced celestial order for all of eternity. Drawing upon the highly sophisticated bureaucratic traditions of the terrestrial planes, Marduk understood that raw military victory alone was never quite enough to effectively command the sprawling heavens. Supreme reigns required formal and absolute authentication to prevent any future shadows of chaos from ever rising out of the dark and uncharted abyss again. He prepared to transform this prize of primeval war into an unbreakable decree of absolute sovereign authority, utilizing a special seal of his own. With a calm and eloquent grace, the young king pressed his own personal divine signet ring directly into the clay surface of the heavy Tablet of Destinies, locking his new cosmic kingship firmly into place by sealing the eternal fates of the entire universe with an undeniable royal signature. Powerful waves of soothing magic pulsed outward from the deep impression, reassuring the rest of the pantheon that a benevolent and flawless administration was finally restored. With the ultimate power of creation now firmly anchored to his resolute will, the radiant conqueror turned his attention toward the massive, fallen form of the defeated dragon goddess. The Enuma Elish describes how Marduk gracefully divided her enormous aquatic body to forge the physical boundaries of our universe. He masterfully separated the swirling, chaotic waters with absolute precision, bringing a breathtaking architectural geometry to a previously unformed and highly turbulent primeval void. Half of her immense primordial essence was stretched endlessly upward to form the luminous, starry heavens spanning far above the awakening world. The remaining half was laid gently down to create the solid, resting earth below, providing a safe and fertile foundation for fragile mortal life to slowly bloom. Deep winding rivers and sweeping atmospheric winds were carefully assigned to their proper domains, ensuring that wild and bitter floods would never again threaten the tranquility of the green agricultural plains. To permanently anchor this newly organized reality to the heavens, the Supreme Creator built a glorious and radiant city upon the muddy banks of the winding Euphrates River. This majestic metropolis was named Babylon, serving as a perfect earthly reflection of the flawless divine realm, residing high in the sweeping celestial canopy. Its towering mud brick walls and bustling avenues were meticulously designed to flawlessly mirror the tranquil harmony of the turning planetary spheres, bringing a profound structural order to the terrestrial realm once again. At the very center of this sun-kissed capital, Marduk constructed a colossal stepped sanctuary known to ancient scholars as Ate-men-an-ki. Early priests translated this magnificent architectural title to mean the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth, perfectly implying its profound cosmic purpose as a bridge between the realms. Rising bravely from the flat desert floor, its massive brick terraces functioned as a physical stairway connecting the resting terrestrial soil directly to the mysterious magic of the celestial atmosphere. Ancient historians and biblical scholars have long regarded this staggering primeval ziggurat as the true historical and architectural inspiration for the legendary Tower of Babel. Its sheer magnitude left an indelible impression upon the collective memory of early civilizations, echoing through distant ages as an ultimate symbol of unified human ambition. In its peak, the sprawling city of Babylon stood proudly as the geographical center of all existence, nurtured continuously by the compassionate and watchful gaze of its supreme patron deity. In absolute awe of this breathtaking act of creation, the great assembly of gods gathered together to formally consolidate his sovereign authority over the cosmos. They marveled at the synchronicity of his newly organized universe, recognizing that their exhausted spirits were finally free from the terrifying threat of sudden annihilation. In their reverence, the grateful gods desired to elevate their heroic savior far beyond his original title as the simple bull calf of the warming sun. Senior deities joyfully bestowed 50 sacred names upon his glowing crown, a profound theological gesture that allowed him to seamlessly absorb the diverse powers of all heavenly existence. They softly hailed him as Asa-Luhi, the glorious bringer of light who mastered the most heavily guarded divine secrets hidden within the deep and silent abyss. He was also revered widely as Tutu, the compassionate creator of calm who possessed the unique ability to soothe all weary hearts of the mortal populations soon to inhabit those rolling plains. Other voices from the luminous court continued to echo across the highest heavens, calling him Shah-Zu, the omniscient reader of hearts, who saw effortlessly through all mortal and divine deception. His ultimate supremacy was permanently cemented when they crowned him Lu-Gal-Dimmer-An-Kia, the absolute and unquestioned king of both the heavens and the earth. Every spoken title added a deeper layer of magical authority to his radiant presence, completing his magnificent transformation into the highest benevolent patriarch. His awe-inspiring dominion was so universally profound that its memory would ripple endlessly across many centuries of passing empires, shifting sands, and wandering desert cultures. Later generations and Hellenistic historians would eventually synchronize his storm-wielding, sovereign authority with highly familiar mythological figures like the Greek god Zeus and the Roman Jupiter. His legendary victory over the primordial sea established a timeless paradigm of heroic leadership that forever altered the cultural and religious landscape of the ancient worlds. Following this dazzling consolidation of cosmic power, Marduk executed a brilliant stroke of peaceful diplomacy that demonstrated a deep and abiding wisdom regarding the delicate balance of the Anunnaki pantheon. Rather than selfishly hoarding the radiant earthen artifact that controlled all of reality, he chose instead to utilize its magic to gently mend the fractured relationships. of his oldest ancestors. He stepped gracefully toward the highest throne of the luminous assembly, preparing to offer the sealed Tablet of Destinies as a grand and beautiful tribute. With his head bowed in quiet reverence, the young champion handed the heavy cosmic ledger upward to the ancient Skyfather known as An. This profound gesture honored the oldest patriarch of the pantheon, making him the official and undisputed custodian of the sweeping celestial decrees that governed the turning stars. Placing the ultimate source code of creation into these senior hands ensured that the newly established cosmic transition was permanent, universally respected, and completely devoid of any lingering jealousy or distrust. This masterful political maneuver also served to gently explain the quiet and natural fading of the great wind god Enlil, the previous supreme ruler of the divine tablets. Because this older deity had remained fearfully hidden in the shadows during the terrifying primordial war, his ancient right to universal sovereignty was softly and naturally forfeited. The sweeping Babylonian retelling of this epic saga gracefully shifted the ultimate authority to Marduk, perfectly reflecting the noble rise of Babylon itself to absolute supremacy. Ancient scribes working in the fragrant tablet houses intentionally crafted this narrative to elevate their beloved city without causing further heavenly strife among the immortal beings. Bypassing the great wind god entirely was a delicate theological necessity, accomplished with a subtlety that avoided inciting any lingering resentment among the older generation of creators. With the divine hierarchy successfully reorganized, and the great tablet resting safely in the highest heavens, all remaining uncertainty completely dissolved into the ether. The sprawling mud-brick cities of ancient Mesopotamia were finally wrapped in an unshakable and protective blanket of starry light, free to prosper and flourish. We drift softly into the deepest folds of our primordial history as this epic era comes to a close, finding deeply restorative slumber in the luminous tapestry turning silently overhead. As the perfected celestial order settles into an unbroken rhythm, a calming stillness spreads across the upper atmospheric reaches, relinquishing entirely to an era of permanent tranquility. That mythical earthen ledger now resides securely under the watchful gaze of the highest ancient creators, its heavily sealed surface guaranteeing that changing seasons will forever turn over in cyclical harmony. Every carefully pressed, wedge-shaped mark upon its baked clay canvas acts as a gentle guiding force for the expansive terrestrial plains stretching far below. Endless cycles of luminous embers glide effortlessly along their highly predictable pathways, weaving a comforting blanket of absolute certainty and peace over the exhausted primal world. Over countless ages, these luminous spheres continued their majestic procession through the open night sky, finally projecting their dazzling light over increasingly tall mud-brick temples, and casting thick shadows that fell softly over the winding streets below. A relaxing evening breeze rolled smoothly across the fertile delta, carrying the sweet, refreshing scents of blooming river reeds into growing settlements that would later expand across this ancient landscape. This gentle wind echoes the peaceful sigh of an earth standing in complete harmony with the vast starry procession traveling overhead. Tired caretakers of the sweeping agricultural gardens willingly surrender to the deeply resonant solace within these tranquil descending layers of nightfall. They lay their weary bodies upon soft-woven mats, allowing the soothing chill of the night air to draw all lingering heat away from their sun-baked skin. Slowly the quiet rustling of palm leaves gently swaying outside their doors blends into a natural, hypnotic melody. The soft, rhythmic breathing of a sleeping population synchronizes perfectly with the slow rotation of the great celestial cycles, dissolving all lingering worldly tensions into thin air. Every humble dwelling is bathed in a pure glow, spilling downward from the protective canopy of upper atmospheric currents. The fragile earthly realm remains cradled securely in a compassionate, intelligent architecture designed so long ago. We drift effortlessly away from the physical soil of waking realms, floating peacefully upon a calm, endless river of deep time. Gentle currents of this unseen, magical waterway carry our wandering consciousness far beyond the structural boundaries and sun-baked clay of early primeval cities. A profound healing warmth radiates from the soft silver light of those distant stars, wrapping the weary human spirit in a secure, ethereal embrace. Tenderly washing over the silent valleys, this eternal starlight alleviates our wandering minds as we sink deeper into the restorative, velvety void, guided only by the flawless mathematics of a beautifully managed sky. Resting comfortably beneath this brilliant astronomical tapestry, a beautiful realization has slowly settled over us. The quiet sense that the overarching fates of humanity have already been carefully woven into the heavens themselves. Those heavy clay tablets of destiny remain sealed and guarded by benevolent immortal hands, ensuring a peaceful and orderly passage through the longest hours of night. The very essence of their cuneiform inscriptions promises that the golden sun will always rise again, exactly when intended. And until that warm morning light returns to the eastern horizon, we are free to simply exist within the quiet, peaceful stillness of our primordial universe. Drift gracefully into the deepest, most tranquil shadows of ancient history, suspended forever in a flawless, beautiful equilibrium of an eternally balanced creation. This renowned Babylonian creation epic securely blanketed a newly formed earth in an eternal layer of divine security. Our brilliant celestial canopy glowed brightly with pure resonant frequencies. However, drifting forward across an endless ocean of deep history reveals that shifting eras never truly stand still within the vastness of this universe. The lore of these earliest triumphant fables slowly shifts toward much later trials that the heavenly authorities were destined to eventually face, in their efforts to maintain balance over the strongest forces known to primeval mankind. Humble reed settlements were rapidly expanding into sprawling terrestrial empires, introducing highly complex administrative challenges. When ages of golden tranquility unfold, even the highest of celestial entities yield to the deep slumber of perfect security. A peace so profound casts shadows long enough to obscure the distant borders of creation, and in those unlit margins, ancient restlessness begins to stir. A whisper of chaos, long dormant, prepares to ascend from the deep, seeking a change in the infinite stewardship of existence. Like the ebbing tides of an endless sandy shoreline, vast eras rise and fall within the silent currents of time. As the primeval storms of Mesopotamian antiquity finally subsided, an era of unprecedented peace would come to take their place for many thousands of years, settling over the ancient mud-brick cities in a warm embrace, and lulling the entire celestial court into a complacent slumber. But is our seemingly finite destiny ever truly locked in place, if even the most sacred, predetermined fates of humanity can be suddenly rewritten when the highest celestial authorities falter their watchful gaze? Drift back through the heavy, fragrant mists of ancient history, settling softly into those quiet, cooling shadows of an enclosed Babylonian courtyard. There, resting peacefully beneath a luminous rotating canopy of distant stars, a weary scribe sinks slowly into a deeply mesmerizing slumber, completely surrendering his tired mind to a mystical vision sent directly from the divine realm of heavenly gods residing far above. This scribe is the author of a mystical poem spanning 5 clay tablets, a haunting vision that would eventually be recorded and known as the Epic of Erra and Ishum. Within the context of this ancient record, we explore how Mesopotamian mythology evolved alongside its expanding mortal populations, charting a hypnotic journey of the legendary Tablet of Destinies as its majestic path is traced from the original hands of its Anunnaki creators, directly into the quiet shadowed archives of dedicated divine scribes. The heat of the sun slowly releases from hard stone pathways, as his slow breath synchronizes perfectly with the steady rhythmic turning of the great celestial wheel. Earthly sensations of bustling daytime avenues slowly fade into a quiet, comforting numbness, leaving only an empty void waiting to receive this cosmic wisdom. Suspended effortlessly within this dark refuge of human consciousness, his wandering spirit detaches entirely from all rigid boundaries of the physical realm. Every softly spoken syllable ripples gently across his resting consciousness, like sweet water flowing down a winding river channel, carrying insightful secrets of primeval creation. Cooling night winds sweep smoothly through deserted corridors of the sleeping metropolis as he slept, carrying a faint metallic scent of mineral-rich water from the nearby Euphrates River. This gentle atmospheric current wraps the massive stone walls of Babylon in a comforting, ethereal chill, soothing the exhausted muscles of thousands of resting laborers. In the hazy veil of this otherworldly dream, a magnificent epic is faintly whispered through the thick blanket of midnight, further revealing the cyclical nature inherent throughout the very fabric of our universe. This sweeping narrative unfolds long after the primeval wars with the dragon goddess found in the Enuma Elish. This sleeping archivist bore silent witness to a dramatic cosmic shift, watching the majestic golden age unravel into a chaotic whirlwind of divine jealousy and unchecked devastation. Swirling shadows dance softly across the edges of his resting consciousness, painting vivid pictures of a restless god plotting a violent rebellion. He dreams of towering mud-brick temples stripped of their radiant glory, and sweeping agricultural plains plunged into a sudden, bitter stillness. These haunting whispers carried on the cooling night wind speak of a vacant celestial throne, warning the vulnerable mortal realm that the absolute laws of the universe can be quickly undone by even a single momentary distraction. A heavy fragrance of burning cedar resin mingles with the bitter scent of impending ruin, guiding his wandering mind through this dark labyrinth of cosmic betrayal. Yet hidden within this terrifying vision of ultimate destruction, a steady voice of reason emerges, offering a bright glimmer of hope for a shattered terrestrial empire. As this mystical dream gently fades into the cool morning air, it leaves behind a deep and abiding understanding of the fragile cosmic balance. Ancient priests and devoted scholars dedicated their entire existence to understanding the sacred decrees handed down from the distant heavens. Mortal caretakers slowly realized that the vast inner workings of their reality required constant vigilance to maintain the flawless harmony of their daily lives. As the sprawling mud-brick cities of Mesopotamia grew in unimaginable power and complexity, so too did their deep reverence for the radiant Tablet of Destinies. The heavy earthen ledger was no longer viewed merely as a static object of supreme power, but rather as an active and impossibly complex administrative heart of the cosmos. This profound change in cultural memory perfectly reflected the shift to a new era in the celestial hierarchy, where the peaceful reign of the gods would soon be tested once again by shadows gathering in the dark. If you are listening to this in the still quiet of the night, let us know where and when you are joining us from in the comments section. There is something comforting in realizing countless listeners, scattered across distant lands and different time zones, all settling into the same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes of human history. And if you are enjoying this boring history narrative, finding it helps you relax or even drift off, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps support our efforts to keep bringing you these ancient stories each week, and continue reaching others who are searching for the same calm place to relax and unwind. If you would like uninterrupted sleep and longer versions, those are available to you through the Legends of the Dawn membership. Now, we return to our ancient scribe and his story that has survived in the form of clay tablets created from the fresh, cool mud of ancient Mesopotamian rivers. As dawn breaks, the scribe picks up his reed stylus, determined to immortalize this grand journey in permanent earthen records, capable of carrying its mythical chronicles through the unfolding centuries yet to come. High above the bustling mud-brick streets of Babylon, the supreme champion Marduk, son of Enki, sat proudly upon his elevated celestial throne. Resting securely across his divine chest was the glowing Tablet of Destinies, a heavy clay ledger that radiated pure mathematical harmony downward into the fertile river valleys. Under his watchful gaze, the sprawling universe fell into a long and highly predictable rhythm that guided the agricultural seasons with absolute precision. A soothing, resonant vibration hummed throughout the deepest foundations of the earth, ensuring that the rushing atmospheric winds never breached the borders of the peaceful settlements. This flawlessly managed cosmic clockwork lulled the entire divine pantheon of Anunnaki gods into a deep sense of security, allowing the immortal creators to finally surrender their heavy burdens of continuous administration. Wandering planets drifted lazily along the golden equatorial band, trusting completely in the absolute authority radiating from the ancient capital. Even the deepest subterranean waters of the abyss flowed with a gentle and unhurried grace, mirroring the profound serenity that blanketed the heavens above. It seemed to both mortals and deities alike that the sweeping terrestrial plains were forever insulated against the terrifying chaos of their primeval past. But a flawless existence maintained without constant vigilance is highly susceptible to the slow, creeping deterioration of time, as countless centuries drifted by in this state of continuous harmony. The great champion slowly grew far too comfortable in his majestic isolation, becoming increasingly detached from the daily terrestrial rhythms of the resting earth. His once radiant royal garments began to lose their blinding luster, while beautiful statues resting in his quiet sanctuaries began to tarnish from subtle and unseen neglect. This lack of oversight allowed quiet cracks to form within the foundational pillars of his sprawling empire, weakening the invisible boundaries that had protected the sleeping populations for so long. The protective magic that had previously nourished the deep roots of civilization began to wane, inadvertently allowing human society to fall into a state of highly vulnerable disarray. Small fractures in the social order slowly widened into deep chasms of unrest as the harmonious melodies of the cosmos grew faint and distant over the endless flat plains. Unpredictable friction returned to the winding avenues of the early metropolis, replacing the sweet scent of blooming reeds with the sharp scent of impending ruin. Exhausted mortal laborers looked upward into the silent night sky, praying for a reassuring sign from the supreme architect, who seemed to have completely forgotten his earthly garden. The celestial authorities remained comfortably asleep upon their high temple platforms, oblivious to the creeping shadows slowly gathering around the fragile edges of the tangible world. These expanding cracks in the heavenly administration fittingly reflect upon a very real and devastating era of chaos that plagued the lands of ancient Babylonia. Scribes working in the fragrant tablet houses during the early first millennium documented a terrifying period, marked by severe famine and bitter war. Foreign invasions swept violently across the flat green plains, completely disrupting the highly structured agricultural networks that had sustained the ancient empires for countless generations. Wandering nomadic tribes pushed deep into the fertile valleys, bringing an unprecedented wave of lawlessness that shattered the remaining fragments of societal order. The historical reality of this prolonged instability was carefully woven into the fabled mythological narrative of the Epic of Erra and Ishum. Ancient theologians sought to explain their devastating geopolitical trauma as a direct reflection of divine activity, viewing the sudden collapse of central governance as a terrifying shift in the heavens above. To the weary minds of the Mesopotamian populations, such widespread destruction could only be the result of a dark and volatile force rising up from the shadows. The poetic verses of their epic tale introduced a terrifying new antagonist named Erra, the restless and unpredictable god of war, plague, and sudden pestilence. He despised the peaceful and orderly universe managed by a comfortable Marduk, desiring only to plunge the carefully structured world back into the deafening roar of primordial turmoil. Simmering with a brewing jealousy, this volatile deity paced furiously through the hidden corners of the celestial realm, finding a grim kinship with a group of fierce and untamed warrior demons known throughout the ancient lore as the Sabiti. These 7 demonic entities were born directly from the seed of the great sky father An, planted deep within the soft and yielding earth of the lower world. Ancient theologians reveal that the great sky father did not forge these entities out of sheer malice, but rather designed them to serve as a terrifying cosmic defense mechanism. He carefully presented these fierce weapons to the restless god of war, instructing him to keep their fury contained until the delicate balance of the universe required intervention, decreeing their grim destinies as a necessary force of ultimate correction. Rising from the dark soil as personified aspects of pure devastation, the Sabiti represented the absolute and untamed destructive forces of wild nature. Ancient clay records paint a truly terrifying picture of these 7 spirits, describing them with the fearsome faces of roaring lions and breath that burned like venomous fire. They possessed an inherent and insatiable hunger for violence, serving as the ultimate and merciless weapons for the restless god of plague. Unlike the benevolent deities who found restorative solace in the quiet turning of the stars, these nefarious manifestations thrived only in the wild fury of the storm. The long and unbroken peace established by the Supreme Champion offered them no satisfying purpose, leaving their destructive energies to fester in the cold shadows of the void. They constantly gathered around Erra, whispering treacherous and seductive words of rebellion directly into his ears. These silver-tongued demons complained bitterly that the long centuries of tranquility had made their sharp weapons dull, and their warrior spirits incredibly soft. Furthermore, they claimed that the constant bustling noise of human civilization rising from the sprawling mud-brick cities severely disturbed their needed rest. Using every dark manipulation at their disposal, they actively incited the plague god to rise up and wage a merciless war against the resting earth. Their venomous whispers slowly poisoned his already envious heart, convincing him that the ultimate authority over the cosmos rightfully belonged to the forces of chaos. Erra gazed toward the glowing high throne of Babylon, plotting a dark and sinister scheme to unseat the complacent king of the gods. He knew that the heavy earthen ledger of destinies could not be taken by brute force, requiring a much more cunning approach to finally shatter the peaceful harmony of the turning universe. The restless god of pestilence listened intently to the soothing flattery of his 7 demonic weapons, allowing their wicked counsel to solidify his devastating intentions. A direct assault upon the supreme champion would only end in his own ruin, forcing him to devise a brilliant strategy built entirely upon elegant deception. Gathering the creeping shadows of the void around him like a heavy cloak, Erra prepared to step out from the darkness and approach the radiant capital of the ancient world. Drifting seamlessly from those outer shadows of antiquity, the god of war ascended slowly toward that magnificent mud-brick sanctuary of Babylon. He walked with an elegant grace, completely devoid of his usual violent tempest, masking a deeply envious heart beneath a calm demeanor. This restless god of pestilence knew brute force would prove entirely useless against such a supreme champion, choosing instead to wield a far more subtle weapon of silver-tongued persuasion. He carefully calculated every single step across those wide stone thresholds, ensuring his sudden arrival appeared as a humble visit of profound respect. The volatile god suppressed his natural instinct for immediate war, burying his dark ambitions beneath a thick veneer of polite diplomacy. This highly sophisticated strategy required flawless execution, demanding a perfect manipulation of an immortal ego that had grown accustomed to endless worship. Stepping softly into those high, luminous halls, he found Marduk resting peacefully upon his elevated celestial throne. That heavy clay ledger of universal fates sat securely against his divine chest, emitting a faint pulse of raw cosmic energy. Erra bowed his head in mock reverence, offering beautifully crafted words of false admiration. This cunning antagonist spoke with a soothing voice, echoing like a gentle summer breeze rustling through dense river reeds. He praised his ancient counterpart for maintaining such a long era of unbroken tranquility across those sprawling terrestrial plains. Hidden carefully within this sweet flattery was a highly calculated seed of doubt, designed to slowly unravel the king's comfortable mindset of absolute security. Ancient Sumerian texts speak of this subtle psychological maneuver designed to break down walls that even the fiercest weapons could never pierce. Erra paced slowly across the polished stone floor, weaving a hypnotic web of feigned concern for his sovereign leader. He spoke of passing ages carrying away the vibrant essence of early creation, leaving behind only exhausted remnants of a once glorious dawn. Moving closer to the radiant seat of power, Erra gazed upward to make a profound observation regarding that magnificent royal attire. He softly pointed out how countless passing centuries had quietly stolen the once blinding luster from Marduk's sacred garments. The magnificent crown resting upon his head had grown visibly dull, tarnished by ages of subtle neglect, while carefully tending to his kingdom. And those flawless statues adorning the quiet earthly sanctuaries were slowly losing their breathtaking polish, dimming the glorious reflection of heavenly authority. This dark visitor reminded his rival of a primeval era, when those majestic robes shined intensely with pure solar radiance, sending a pure tension-resolving frequency to permeate the untamed universe. The vibrant luminescence that once held chaotic saltwater tides and monstrous dragon goddesses at bay had slowly diminished into a fading echo of its original majesty. Erra lamented this slow deterioration with masterful sorrow, weaving an intoxicating spell of pure vanity around the king. suggesting that his complacent reign over such a tranquil world had inadvertently drained the vital celestial energy from his holy vestments, reflecting a tragic fading of his absolute supremacy. The proud champion listened intently to these silver-tongued whispers, feeling a sudden surge of unexpected shame regarding his diminishing splendor, a brilliant deception that easily bypassed every formidable defense under his command. A heavy silence stretched across the vast assembly hall, allowing those poisonous words to sink deeply into his immortal mind. Marduk looked down upon his worn golden threads, recognizing the bitter truth hidden within this treacherous observation. Any flawless perfection of his cosmic reign was physically eroding, threatening to diminish his absolute standing among the watchful pantheon. Seizing this fleeting moment of insecurity, the plague god gently offered a seemingly perfect solution to restore that lost magnificence. He proposed that the Supreme Creator should temporarily leave his watchful post to seek absolute purification deep below the yielding terrestrial crust. Erra spoke warmly, painting a highly vivid picture of those pure subterranean fresh waters resting quietly within the uncharted abyss, promising they possessed a deeply restorative magic. This pure subterranean sanctuary had once served as a flawless biological forge for the wise water god Enki during the earliest days of creation. Its deep, unhurried currents were said to hold a uniquely invigorating essence, capable of washing away the heaviest burdens of divine administration. Plunging his heavy crown into that sweet primeval ocean would instantly wash away every layer of accumulated worldly dust. A thorough cleansing within those unhurried currents would return the blinding glow to his frayed woven robes, renewing his unquestioned majesty in full. This cunning deceiver assured his host that such a brief departure would cause absolutely no harm to the eternal mechanism of the cosmic wheel. Merely a brief immersion in those sacred waters would effortlessly strip away any lingering tarnish, restoring his pure, blinding aura of supreme command. Thoroughly captivated by this mesmerizing vision, he yearned to feel that cool, refreshing magic wash over his exhausted frame, and return to his high throne with a renewed physical perfection that would command absolute awe from the younger generation of deities. Erra helped to solidify his longing, spinning a mesmerizing vision of a renewed king returning to his high terrace, burning brighter than the glowing morning sun itself. This flawless imagery catered directly to a deeply ingrained desire to maintain absolute perfection over the flourishing earthly garden. Meanwhile, Erra promised to stand as a loyal guardian over those empty halls, while his senior counterpart embarked to restore his glory. He vowed to maintain the flawless alignment of wandering stars, ensuring that no sudden chaos could threaten sleeping agricultural settlements. This articulate deception resonated beautifully within Marduk's tired mind, completely obscuring the truly sinister motive hiding just beneath the war god's friendly facade. Marduk made the fateful decision to temporarily step away from his heavy cosmic duties. He slowly unfastened that glowing ledger of universal destinies, leaving its immense power unprotected upon a high stone altar. Rising from an elevated dais, the proud god descended toward the quiet depths of the underwater abyss, seeking to reclaim a fading echo of his primeval youth. His heavy celestial weapons were set aside in the desperate pursuit of restored pride. A gentle silence fell over that magnificent inner chamber as the great champion willingly surrendered his physical connection to the vast cosmic network. The Tablet of Destinies remained entirely unguarded, pulsing softly with an exposed and highly vulnerable magic. The sweet fragrance of nearby burning cedar resin lingered thickly in the air as his radiant silhouette disappeared down the winding stone corridor. deep rhythmic hums of distant planetary gears continued their slow rotation, completely unaware of the tragic shift in cosmic authority. An entire pantheon of watchful deities slept soundly, trusting blindly in a secure foundation that was now rapidly fracturing. His majestic departure echoed softly down those descending stairways, leaving the ultimate seat of governance completely empty. For an agonizingly brief moment, a profound stillness swept across the upper atmosphere, holding the delicate balance of existence in absolute suspense. Any supreme architecture of a beautifully managed sky suddenly lacked its vital stabilizing anchor. Standing alone within that deserted throne room, Erra gazed triumphantly upon the undefended expanse of sleeping mud-brick cities. This masterful deception had successfully severed the ancient protective tether, clearing a direct path for untamed forces of nature to rise once again. He reveled in the sudden terrifying power that coursed through his own veins, intoxicated by the total lack of opposition. The fierce demonic warriors of the Sabiti whispered excitedly from the darkest edges of his mind, urging him to unleash their uncompromising fury. The deafening roar of primordial turmoil was finally ready to shatter the beautifully constructed peace that had endured for countless generations. That glowing clay tablet pulsed quietly upon its cold stone pedestal, abandoned by the benevolent hand that once carefully directed its magic. A terrifying shadow began to slowly expand across those sacred celestial blueprints, threatening to rewrite the peaceful destiny of all living creatures. Our fragile reality was now left entirely at the mercy of a volatile storm, completely defenseless against the coming tide of unyielding destruction. The flawless universal rhythm ground to a sudden halt, marking a devastating transition into an petrifying era of absolute darkness. By shedding his radiant crown and descending into the watery depths of the Apsu, Marduk thoroughly severed that sacred protective bond, tying Anunnaki creators directly to their glowing Tablet of Destinies. Leaving a fragile earthly realm completely unanchored, abandoning the sprawling terrestrial empire to pure chance. The golden resonant frequencies that once vibrated endlessly now began to falter, plunging the heavenly sanctuaries into an erratic rhythm. Without a benevolent king to guide its magic, our entire universe drifted aimlessly like a rudderless boat upon a dark, stormy sea. Erra stepped eagerly toward the elevated pedestal, reaching his hands toward the pulsating earthen stone that governed all reality. He gleefully commandeered the highest authority of the heavens. Gazing down upon a defenseless world, he felt the intoxicating surge of absolute power coursing through his immortal veins. The gentle, steady turning of ancient cosmic gears shuddered violently, forced to obey the dark commands of this volatile new master. Sitting proudly upon the deserted throne, Erra embraced the suffocating silence. He relished the success of his eloquent deception, marveling at how easily the king had surrendered all of his great power. A sinister smile crossed his face as he finally grasped his complete dominion over the countless sleeping mortals resting blindly far below. Thick, suffocating shadows gathered rapidly around the high throne, answering a sinister call of this newly crowned deity of plagues and war. He quickly turned his attention toward the 7 fierce demonic warriors of destruction, finally granting them permission to strike. The war god proudly unleashed these terrifying Sabiti upon human populations, directing their untamed fury toward the sprawling agricultural empires. These ferocious entities rushed vigorously from the dark corners of the celestial realm, howling like a bitter winter wind. Ancient lore depicts them with fearsome faces of roaring lions, exhaling a toxic breath that burned like venomous fire. They plunged rapidly through the bitterly cold upper atmosphere. The soothing silver light of familiar constellations was instantly choked out by their descent, replaced by an unnatural creeping gloom. A heavy weight of despair fell across winding avenues, suffocating the sweet scent of blooming reeds with the acrid, metallic aroma of desolation. Sleeping mortals woke suddenly in absolute terror, sensing that their protective tether to benevolent gods had been brutally severed. Mud-brick cities plunged abruptly into a chaotic whirlwind of sudden pestilence. A terrifying sickness swept rapidly through the once vibrant delta, draining vital energy from exhausted laborers of terrestrial plains. As those 7 demons tore through the once peaceful settlements, the meticulously engraved fates of our world were violently blurred upon the holy clay. Glowing cuneiform inscriptions that once promised a secure future began to fade into a dark, illegible smear of tragic uncertainty. Every delicate wedge pressed into soft river mud lost its pristine clarity, throwing the world completely out of alignment. Overarching destinies of mankind and the universe at large were actively rewritten by malevolent forces, erasing the protective blueprints of the Holy May. Without these sacred celestial instructions to guide them, highly organized networks of human cooperation fractured into isolated fragments of fear. The once harmonious melodies of temple musicians were quickly drowned out by harsh, dissonant noise of brothers turning against brothers in the darkened streets. Trust dissolved completely into thin air, leading inevitably to an agonizingly bitter civil war. People abandoned their carefully tended gardens, fleeing aimlessly into the barren desert in a desperate attempt to escape the invisible, sweeping plague which now cursed the lands. Wandering nomadic tribes pushed aggressively into fertile river valleys, completely ignoring the previously established boundaries of a faltering ancient empire. With them came an unprecedented wave of lawlessness, further shattering the remaining fragments of central governance that previously anchored the sprawling metropolis. Soon famine settled deeply into the sun-baked soil, transforming vibrant pastures into dusty, barren wastelands devoid of all vital moisture. Weary farmers watched helplessly as their carefully planned crops withered away, starved by an unnatural heat radiating from dark skies. A terrifying silence replaced the usually familiar sounds of grinding stone, signaling a complete collapse of all earthly productivity. With every passing day, the magnificent harmony established by earlier creators slipped further and further into a dark, impenetrable abyss. The once predictable rising of golden mornings was constantly delayed by thick, unnatural clouds of dark atmospheric smoke. Early humanity was left to wander aimlessly through decaying streets. Winding irrigation canals were left choked with debris, starving the parched soil. Towering mud-brick sanctuaries slowly began to crumble from neglect, losing their radiant polish as daily rituals of devotion were entirely abandoned. Sprawling urban centers that took countless ages to construct seemed to regress backward into a primitive, untamed wilderness. It was a complete unraveling of delicate cultural progress, reversing a beautiful harmony that had been so carefully nurtured by the wise water god. Sleeping populations were plunged deeply into a void of uncertainty, tossing restlessly upon their woven reed mats, plagued by terrifying visions of a world rapidly falling out of balance. They could no longer trace the familiar patterns of protective constellations watching overhead, as heavy storms completely obscured the crystalline expanse. Without a divine anchor to guide them, a devastating sense of isolation gripped every beating heart within this ancient empire. Winding currents of the Euphrates River seemed to slow their steady pace, absorbing the oppressive atmosphere descending from the churning sky. These ancient waters ran black with despair, mourning the loss of their benevolent ruler. Every mortal spirit waited in a state of suspended animation, praying desperately for a miraculous recovery. High above the unraveling terrestrial plains, Erra watched the rampant devastation with a triumphant pride. He reveled in the chaotic symphony of his untamed weapons, believing his violent rebellion had permanently erased the complacent reign of Marduk. This volatile deity paced across the polished stone floors of the sanctuary, completely intoxicated by his newly acquired dominion over a fragile earth. His demonic forces continued to roam freely through heavy shadows, stripping the fertile delta of its bountiful organic harvest. The deafening roar of primordial chaos drowned out all quiet sighs of nature, replacing serene order with absolute pandemonium. This merciless war against our resting earth threatened to bring about a total, unforgiving annihilation. The invisible demons' twisted forms danced wildly across the expansive lands, relishing the bitter suffering of mankind. They fed upon the overwhelming terror generated by this sudden, inexplicable disruption. It was a brutal reminder that lurking forces were always waiting patiently for a chance to strike. Dust storms whipped violently across the flat plains, and the beautiful geometric architecture of early humanity was slowly ground down into scattered debris, swallowed endlessly by a creeping wasteland. Yet even within this suffocating atmosphere of complete cosmic despair, a faint spark of profound intelligence refused to simply stand by as the world was extinguished. It was not a fate passively accepted by every member of the celestial court. A stabilizing figure watched this madness unfold from the quiet edges of heaven, deeply troubled by the unchecked rage of his master. Such excessive, senseless slaughter would eventually destroy the very foundation of their own divine existence. He knew the relentless fury of the plague god had to be carefully contained before our fragile universe was permanently broken. Stepping softly out from gathering shadows, a wise, eloquent counselor prepared to offer a brilliant defense. This noble deity was known to ancient priests as Ishum, the wise and loyal vizier of the restless plague god. He gazed downward upon the burning agricultural gardens with immense sorrow, unwilling to watch early humanity perish beneath such senseless, untamed fury. The eloquent counselor stood bravely as the final barrier between terrified mortal populations and their total annihilation. He understood that raising heavy weapons of war against his volatile master would only multiply the rampant destruction sweeping across the fertile southern delta. Salvation required a much softer approach, once again relying entirely upon the captivating magic of an eloquent, well-reasoned speech. Ishum glided gracefully into the captured high sanctuary of Babylon, where Erra sat intoxicated by his stolen glory. The gentle vizier carried no sharpened spears or drawn wooden bows into that deserted, echoing temple complex. His persona exuded a calm, peaceful demeanor in a calculated strategy carefully designed to manipulate Erra's arrogant, immortal ego. His rationalizing words washed over the entire throne room with the grace of a river swelling slowly to meet the eminence of the sea. This brilliant mediator began his delicate intervention by heaping lavish, poetic flattery upon the volatile deity of war, praising the terrifying magnitude of those recent conquests, acknowledging that Erra had successfully proven his absolute supremacy over all earthly domains. The wicked antagonist listened closely, feeding his immense vanity with sweet, respectful words of admiration. Ishum patiently reasoned with the proud conqueror, reminding him that a true sovereign requires a thriving, populous kingdom to properly worship his greatness. If every last human laborer was washed away into a dark void, there would be no voices left to sing his majestic praises. He conjured a vivid vision of empty, barren temples, where fragrant incense would never again burn in honor of the victorious plague god and his triumphs. This wise counselor questioned the value of ruling over a silent, dusty wasteland devoid of all vibrant life. He suggested that true power lay not in total erasure, but in commanding the absolute reverence of a flourishing, grateful civilization. To completely extinguish the sweeping terrestrial plains would leave only an empty, hollow silence echoing through the high celestial courts. Ishum reminded his master that sweet offerings of grain and pure water relied upon the steady, devoted hands of a living workforce. Preserving a remnant of the early empire would guarantee a permanent, loyal following to forever chronicle the terrifying might of the war god. This brilliant psychological maneuvering began to slowly calm the violent storm brewing inside his envious, immortal heart. The fierce tempest of unchecked rage gradually softened into a gentle, highly pacified lull of supreme satisfaction. Erra looked down upon the terrified terrestrial landscape, his dark ambitions finally satiated by the monumental display of his own terrifying strength. A heavy, restorative silence fell over the luminous halls as the war god finally relented his merciless assault. He commanded those 7 demonic Sabiti to immediately halt their relentless march across the fertile Mesopotamian landscape. Those terrifying spirits of devastation retreated obediently back into the hidden, lightless corners of the lower earth. Charmed completely by this eloquent diplomacy, the plague god openly admitted that his dark fury had grown out of control. He confessed to his wise counselor that a blinding wave of sudden anger had driven him to ravage the innocent earthly garden. Seeking to mend the shattered settlements, he commanded his trusted vizier to shift his role from a restraining voice of reason into a dedicated rebuilder of the fallen empire. Erra ordered Ishum to drive out the foreign nomadic invaders who had violently pillaged the fragile cities during the chaos. The wise mediator was tasked with washing away the bitter stains of war and restoring the sprawling mud-brick pathways of Babylonia to their former glory. This divine decree cleared a peaceful path for the exhausted mortal population to rise from the ashes and rebuild their sacred sanctuaries. The bitter, metallic scent of war slowly dissipated from the cooling night air, slowly but surely replaced once again by a sweet fragrance of blooming flowers. Dark clouds of sickness evaporated entirely, allowing soothing silver starlight to shine clearly upon the resting delta. A gentle, healing warmth spread across the fertile valleys, reviving the withered crops resting quietly in the fields. Civil unrest across the winding streets of the ancient metropolis faded beautifully into a quiet, restorative peace. Frightened citizens dropped their makeshift weapons, embracing their neighbors compassionately, as their long nightmare of sudden pestilence simply washed away like dry dust caught in a gentle spring rain. The harmonious turning of the celestial spheres gradually resumed its steady, comforting rhythm. The delicate cosmic balance had been gracefully salvaged by this masterful diplomacy, and soon a radiant light returned to the highest reaches of the sky. Marduk ascended gracefully from the subterranean freshwaters of the Apsu, his purification finally complete. He entered the silent throne room bathed in a blinding restorative solar aura that chased away all lingering shadows. His royal garments, once dull from centuries of neglect, now shimmered with a breathtaking brilliance. Yet as he gazed down from his high terrace, the supreme champion was struck with absolute horror at the devastated condition of his beloved city. He wept bitterly for the ravaged agricultural gardens and the crumbling temples, mourning the tragic consequence of his own temporary absence. Despite his deep sorrow over the dark manipulation that had usurped his throne, the king realized he must take immediate action to heal the frightened world. The radiant champion reclaimed his elevated seat of authority without facing any continued threat of divine conflict, ready to anchor the heavens once again. His majestic physical presence instantly stabilized the floating dance of the starry canopy, turning quietly overhead. He securely fastened the resplendent Tablet of Destinies back across his own divine chest. Pure magic flowed effortlessly from the holy clay, reawakening the familiar, soothing cadence of the vast universe. The sacred ledger of creation was permanently secured once more, casting a protective silver glow over the entire empire. Sleeping agricultural communities could once again rest safely under a flawlessly managed, peaceful night sky. The familiar, soothing songs of temple musicians echoed softly through the dusty avenues, celebrating the miraculous deliverance of their fragile world. Winding irrigation canals swelled with pure, sweet fresh water, carrying a renewed vitality directly into the thirsty basins of the lower marshes. Exhausted mortal laborers surrendered their waking consciousness to the soft, velvety shadows, drifting into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. The unbroken harmony of the ancient cosmos was beautifully restored, wrapping the fragile earthly garden in an eternal, protective embrace. But this terrifying brush with total darkness also proved that the cosmos required a more vigilant method of oversight. Leaving the central seat of heavenly governance entirely empty had nearly cost the early civilization everything it had built. The watchful pantheon was reminded of the dire importance of maintaining the cosmic ledger. They decided that a new protector would ensure that the vital seat of power was never again left unguarded. They needed a steadfast custodian who would never step away from the elevated throne room to leave the power of the tablet susceptible to the jealous eyes of wild forces. This vital realization led to a monumental shift in how the turning universe would be managed from there on. Seeking a flawless anchor for the shifting heavens, the radiant champion Marduk turned thoughtfully toward his own beloved son. This brilliant deity was known widely across the ancient world as Nabu. He possessed a deeply meditative spirit, perfectly suited for the meticulous, endless demands of cosmic administration. Nabu was revered by early populations as the ultimate patron of scribes, functioning as the eternal keeper of divine knowledge. His quiet, pensive demeanor stood in beautiful contrast to the volatile tempest of the restless plague god. He found restorative solace in the soft repetitive scrape of a reed stylus against damp river clay. Recognizing his unparalleled dedication to the sacred arts, Marduk graciously passed the heavy earthen artifact down to his capable heir. The young god inherited the great cosmic ledger from his father, humbly accepting the staggering weight of universal governance. His immortal hands grasped the radiant tablet with a calm and measured certainty. With Nabu now serving as the permanent watchman, the absolute source code of reality would never again be left unguarded. He took his place in the quiet archives of the highest heavens, surrounded by the sweet fragrance of burning cedar. The holy May resonated beautifully within his careful, mathematical mind. This peaceful transition of power introduced a highly organized, administrative rhythm back into the sprawling mud-brick cities far below. Wandering planetary spheres fell into perfect alignment with his steady and methodical celestial record-keeping. A comforting blanket of absolute security washed smoothly over the once terrified populations of the fertile delta. To ensure the continuous harmony of the expanding terrestrial gardens, a magnificent cosmic tradition was officially established. Every single spring, as the rushing rivers swelled with sweet fresh water, a grand gathering of the immortal pantheon of great Anunnaki gods took place. Ancient historians refer to this mesmerizing rhythm of renewal as the majestic assembly of the new year. During this mesmerizing celestial convergence, supreme deities traveled from the farthest corners of the universe to the radiant capital of Babylon. They arrived in a slow and hypnotic procession, taking their exalted seats within the luminous assembly halls. The massive mud brick sanctuary hummed with a pure, tension-resolving frequency. Luminous gods sat together in absolute silence, bathed beautifully in the soft silver light of the turning constellations. They gathered specifically to consolidate their divine will for the upcoming 12 months of the earthly calendar. Every intricate detail of mortal existence was carefully debated and decided upon by these ancient creators. Sitting peacefully before this quiet, luminous assembly was the brilliant scribe god Nabu. The legendary Tablet of Destinies rested securely upon his lap, waiting patiently to receive the new edicts of the watching stars. He held his smooth wooden stylus with a relaxed and highly practiced grace. As the supreme deities reached their harmonious consensus, Nabu began the meticulous process of physically engraving their decrees. He pressed the delicate wedge-shaped markings directly into the heavy clay, recording the specific, prosperous fates of every single nation. The gentle rustling of his tools provided a deeply soothing melody for the gathered immortal court. Every flawless impression secured the bountiful agricultural harvests and gentle seasonal rains for the sprawling terrestrial empire. He carved the predetermined destinies of every sleeping individual into the damp earth, weaving their fleeting lives into the grand cosmic tapestry, and carefully locking the vast turning heavens into a comfortingly predictable rhythm. Over the passing centuries, the beautiful concept of this annual cosmic gathering echoed deeply across shifting cultural landscapes. Wandering desert tribes and later empires absorbed this mesmerizing imagery into their own developing religious traditions. The glowing clay artifact meticulously managed by Nabu directly inspired the later Near Eastern concept of a heavenly book of life. Early theologians embraced the comforting idea that a supreme ledger held the recorded fates of all humanity, finding immense psychological solace in knowing that their personal journeys were already planned out by compassionate hands. As Nabu eternally impressed his celestial decrees across the damp clay, a deep stillness descended over the winding avenues of Babylon. Through the incredibly thorough work of this patron deity of scribes, the universe functioned with a beautifully balanced grace. Earthly priests working in the fragrant tablet houses flawlessly mirrored the divine actions of their beloved patron god. They copied the sacred blueprints with their own slender reeds, maintaining the vital connection between the mortal and heavenly realms. Their steady devotion ensured that the protective magic of the cosmos flowed freely into the terrestrial realm. The celestial sphere rotated smoothly onward, driven by the quiet accounting of the stars. Cooling night winds carried the faint earthen scent of mineral-rich water across the sleeping delta. Sprawling agricultural communities could finally surrender to the descending shadows of nightfall without any lingering hesitation, for the undeniable certainty of this grand cosmic system promised that the golden sun would always rise exactly as intended. Exhausted workers rested peacefully upon their woven mats, completely wrapped in a secure and ethereal embrace. Our resting world was eternally anchored to the flawlessly turning pathways of a beautifully managed sky, welcoming a lasting era of protective magic. This new age extended far beyond the luminous halls of the highest gods, weaving itself directly into the daily lives of ancient Mesopotamians. Wandering scholars reveal a fascinating piece of world history, noting that early populations viewed the myth itself as a highly powerful talismanic amulet capable of shielding their vulnerable cities from misfortune. For Erra had promised to eternally reward anyone who honored their heroic tale. Devoted scribes laboring within the fragrant, shadowed tablet houses would meticulously copy specific snippets of these mythological verses onto small pieces of damp river clay. They carefully shaped these earthen fragments to resemble delicate pendants, firing them in hot kilns until the protective words were permanently locked into solid form. These magical talismans were then hung peacefully upon the thick mud brick walls of humble dwellings, serving to safely insulate sleeping families against various ailments and warding off dark shadows. The physical presence of these small baked tablets resting above wooden doorways offered great comfort. As cooling evening breezes swept smoothly across the flat green valleys, they carried the sweet scent of blooming reeds over these inscribed amulets, activating a silent layer of divine defense. Every carefully pressed cuneiform wedge acted as a quiet sentinel in the dark, ensuring that no misfortune would ever breach the peaceful threshold of the mortal world. High above this shielded terrestrial garden, Nabu sits within the highest starry archives, his slender reed stylus eternally gliding across the heavy cosmic ledger, beautifully capturing the flawless mathematics of the universe with a patient devotion. The quiet rustling of his smooth wooden tools synchronizes beautifully with the resting amulets hanging softly upon the doors of resting mud brick homes below, creating an elegant harmony between them. This unbroken rhythm of celestial accounting weaves a comforting lullaby that resonates beautifully across the expansive currents of deep time. Those ancient tales have left a lasting impression upon all of humanity, whispering their secrets across countless ages of shifting empires. Mothers sang soothing verses of this primeval epic to their children, transforming the shadowed history of the cosmos into a beautiful song of eternal salvation. Their soft voices drifted upward to mingle with the pure silver light of the stars, gracefully bridging the vast gap between the muddy delta and the rotating canopy overhead. This shared cultural memory cultivated an unshakable faith in the benevolent architects of the universe, proving that even the greatest of storms could be calmed by the power of reason. The heat of day slowly releases from the winding streets of ancient Babylonia, dissolving completely into the ether, to be replaced by a fragrant, ethereal mist rolling slowly over the quiet southern delta. Rhythmic breathing from the slumbering mud brick cities blends seamlessly into the gentle turning of the planetary spheres drifting through the heavens, wrapping the vulnerable human spirit in an eternal, secure embrace. Lingering curiosity melts away beneath the watchful gaze of ancient deities, allowing mortal consciousness to sink into a state of restoration in the cool night air. Drift weightlessly upon a calm, endless ocean of starlight, carried smoothly toward the most tranquil, dusky haze of night. The radiant clay tablets of destiny remain carefully sealed and safely stored by benevolent hands in the highest archives of the night sky. In this profound silence, the great river of memory flows back to wash away the dust of ages past, rest within the gentle tides of the cosmos, basking in the pure silver light of the celestial heavens. This timeless narrative of the ancient world does not simply fade into the past, it flows smoothly onward, carrying its protective magic across the expansive currents of deep time. You are now a part of this grand continuous tapestry of history, sharing the very same quiet journey through the forgotten echoes that weary scribes and scholars have traveled for thousands of years. As these ancient verses bridge the gap across the centuries, they weave an unbroken line of comforting security that remains alive in the quiet night. The same rhythmic, universal balance that once stabilized the sprawling mud brick cities of Mesopotamia continues to turn quietly overhead, shielding the vulnerable human spirit from all unrest. Just as the early humans found deep solace beneath a flawlessly managed sky, the peaceful, enduring rhythm of the stars continues to watch over this ongoing chronicle. The great river of historical memory rolls lazily onward into the late hours, wrapping your thoughts in a familiar, tranquil embrace that has never truly broken. Let all lingering awareness blend effortlessly into this beautiful, unfolding tradition as the soothing cadence of the past cradles your spirit, leaving only a vast, endless ocean of starlight to carry you forward. Sink weightlessly into the soft shadows, secure in the knowledge that a quiet, restorative sleep is simply the natural continuation of this peaceful journey.